So there's many forms that make up the buying and selling process, but the main form between a buyer and a seller on any purchase is the agreement of purchase and sale. The agreement of purchase and sale is made up of the form itself as well as any associated schedules. So let's walk through that together. So the first section is pretty simple. It really just identifies who the buyers are, who the sellers are, the address of the property in question. It also has a legal description of the property. That can be confusing, but that's really just the way the property is labeled in the government's land registry system. So the next section we're going to deal with is the purchase price and the deposit. The offer price is pretty clear. It's stated both in numbers and in words. Deposit's also stated clearly, and it's usually 5% of the purchase price, but that's negotiable between the buyer and the seller. The important thing to take note in terms of the deposit is due within 24 hours. Okay, so if you're making an offer, you need to make sure you've got those funds readily available and ready to transfer within 24 hours of acceptance of the offer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the schedules. So every agreement of purchase and sale will generally come with a Schedule A and a Schedule B. Custom clauses can be inserted into those schedules. Now, I'm not going to talk about those here. I'm going to do a separate video to talk about them. But as your realtor, obviously, I add several clauses in the agreements to protect your interests, whether you're a buyer or a seller. The other main important note is the irrevocable date of the offer. Okay, so if you're making an offer as a buyer, for example, it's a binding contract until it expires, and that's dictated by the irrevocable date we're looking at here. Okay, so for example, if you as a buyer put an offer out and it expires at 5 p.m. today, that means that's legally binding until 5 p.m. today. Okay, so the seller on the other end has till 5 p.m. to address that. So that's the irrevocable date. It's pretty important. The other one is the actual completion date. So the way you're going to think about a completion date, basically that's your close date. That's the time at which keys are going to be handed and exchanged back and forth between lawyers. And if you bought the new house, you're going to get possession of your home on that day. That's the close date. When we're talking about the close dates, it's important to note that the close date might say, for example, January 16th. They have until 6 p.m. on that day. So there's no set time as when keys are exchanged. The lawyer's got to do their own work, get everything done. It's generally done by end of business on that day. But sometimes there can be kind of issues that happen that delay closing for that reason. And generally with my buyers and sellers, I try and avoid Friday closes. This way, if something slides, it slides into the next business day. It doesn't slide across the weekend. Okay, so what we're looking at here now are basically chattels and fixtures. So what is a chattel? A chattel is basically anything in the home that you're purchasing that's not built in or fastened into a wall, right? So it's furniture, things of that nature. Chattels are deemed excluded unless they're specifically included in a deal. So any appliances, you'll generally see those listed here. Fixtures, on the other hand, are kind of like the reverse. So a fixture is anything that's bolted in. Okay, and a fixture is deemed included unless it's specifically excluded. So let's think about this for a second. Let's say, for example, you've got a fancy chandelier that's got sentimental value and you're selling your home and you want to take that chandelier with you. It's fastened in, it's a fixture. So if you say nothing in the agreement of purchase and sale, that means that fixture will be left. We have to specifically exclude that fixture to make sure it's captured appropriately in the contract. The final one we'll talk about here in this section really is rental items. So this section identifies anything that's rented and where the buyer is going to be assuming the rental contract. Okay, if it's not listed here as rented, it needs to be discharged or paid for before it closes. Typically, it's a hot water heater. It's accepted as a rental item, but anything else that may be rented that the seller is expecting the buyer to take over as a rental agreement needs to be listed in this section. The last two sections we want to talk about in the agreement of purchase and sale is the first one's whether HST is included or not in the purchase price. Generally, for almost in every case, for resale residential homes in Ontario, HST is not applicable, so it's always going to be included in the purchase price. If you buy from a builder, the government does charge HST, although typically builders will have that also built into the purchase price, and that'll be itemized in the sales agreement with the builder itself. HST is applicable on commercial properties, so It's just, this section is really just going to highlight whether it's in the purchase price or it's not, HST. The other major section we're going to talk about is basically the deadline for the title search. When you buy any property, it assumes that title is good. Your lawyer is going to do, as part of their legal services, do a title search and whatnot. This basically just sets the deadline for them to flag any major issues that might impact closing. And generally, the deadline for this is generally a couple of weeks before closing. So that's what we're going to talk about. Those are the major sections I wanted to cover in terms of the agreement of purchase and sale. You can see there's obviously some other form clauses in there. I've attached a blank version of the agreement of purchase and sale to this email. Have a read. If there's anything that's not clear, give me a call and we'll talk through it.